two things. First, the mental health of our world. And I would say it's not in a good shape, but we have some very good, very positive signs. First, the tiredness. COVID has brought tiredness to people, fatigue, mental fatigue, and we all know that. I've seen people, in the northern hemisphere coming to the summer break exhausted in companies, in many, many companies. And you imagine the southern hemisphere, they didn't have any summer break because there's no summer there at that time. But I've seen in those countries where the sanitary crisis is critical, particularly in Latin America, I've seen the resilience of these people. And that makes me extremely positive for the future. I think humankind has an enormous resilience that can, bring us the strength that we need to change. But mental health in the world of people is really a concern that we have to be conscious about. The second thing is we live in a very fragmented geopolitical world. We all know that, and you mentioned that. And when it was not that much fragmented, we could have the SDGs, right? Now it would be much tougher. And that creates, and that has created with the COVID crisis, absolute inconsistency in the way governments have reacted to COVID. Absolute inconsistency, which leads countries like Australia actually having the same level of vaccination as Brazil, less than 30%, but on very different paths. And with very strict lockdowns in Australia that have been extremely disruptive to the country. So immense inconsistency, which brings, of course, antagonisms, which brings anxiety to people, which brings also mistrust to governments, to your earlier point. And for multinationals like Sodexo, we operate in 60 countries, we have 420,000 people. Which brings lots of hurdles and difficulties because people in the company expect to be treated equally with the same attention, and they don't understand when things are so different from one country to another. But there is one thing that makes me very confident. There is something that unites people all over the world. Is the social dimension. People need recognition. All over the world, there is something common here. If we bring recognition, we change the world. If we bring respect to people, we change the world. And recognition is very concrete. It's recognition for the people who have essential jobs that were in the shadow and that came to the light with COVID-19. All the people, of course, in Sodexo, people who clean the rooms of the patients in hospitals, people who feed, children, people who accompany elderly. And there are many more jobs that are, not well considered, not well paid, but that have been essential. And there is something to do there if we want to create a bright future for humankind. But that unites people. That social aspect of things is uniting us. Inclusion. Lots of people aspire for inclusion, for being included. And we see even a reverse impact of inclusion. I have received an email during Sodexo is very active in inclusion, of course, inclusion of minorities, particularly in the US, particularly Black minorities and Hispanic minorities. And I have received an email from a white man saying, as a white man, you promote so much inclusion for minorities. Do I have a future in the company as a white male? Right? That question is good. That means everyone wants to feel included. So one thing about social aspects that I would like to mention, social aspects are today, they bring people together more around the world, they bring people more together than climate change. Climate change is still not, I think, well understood or well appropriated by people all over the world. Of course, it depends on, on the geographies, depends very much on generations. Chinese people are much more scared about the food safety than climate change. So, what do I see are the roles of corporations in what we have ahead of us? I had the immense pleasure of and honor to have a private lunch with Shimon Peres, the Peace Nobel Prize winner and President of Israel. And he said, governments think short term because politics is short term, the next election, where they should think long term, but they don't. Governance thinks borders and defense. And you companies, private companies, you have an immense role to play because you have economic power. Because you can think long term if you want to. Not all companies do that, but I think here we are there to think long term. You don't think borders, you want to expand, so you think beyond borders. And you want peace to develop harmoniously. So we have that responsibility to change the world because we have the economic power, because we can afford to think long term if you want to. And if we want to do that, we just cannot do that alone. And that's what you said, Marcelo. That's what Benoit said. We cannot do that alone. We have to develop multi-stakeholder strategies. And it's not easy. Acting on our ecosystems with our suppliers, with our clients, with our employees, trade unions is critical, but it's not easy. It's easier to work with your suppliers than to work with your clients. Because if you push your clients too much, you have a risk of losing them. It's not easy to work with your competitors. And let me give you a very concrete example. Sodexo is very active in food waste. We are ahead of our competitors in many things on food waste, in many things that we do. But if we really want the needle to move there, and food waste is a scandal. 30% of the food that is produced on Earth is wasted. 30%. And so immense emitter of course, greenhouse gas emissions, food. So, at what moment do I decide to partner with my competitor and lose a possible competitive advantage that I have today for the greater good? That's not easy. So what's the price of the greater good? And multi-stakeholder, critical alliances is the path to go. But it requires also within companies a multi-stakeholder governance. How can we have a multi-stakeholder strategy if we have a board that represents shareholders and sometimes employees a bit? That won't work. That won't work. So we need, and the entreprise à mission that has been created in France is a great path for that. But we need multi-stakeholder governance in private companies to move the needle. And as we move towards that path, companies will enter into the unknown territories that you were mentioning, Jean-Paul. They enter into unknown territories of corporate activism. When you are on Milton Friedman theory, it's easy. Just have to make profit. Don't care about the rest. So it's easy in a way. But when your company is, when you feel that you're responsible for more than that, responsible for being an actor of societal issues, then it's corporate activisms, and we're not really at scale, ready for that. Governance on one side, but also all the reactions that we can create with our decisions or with our positions. Let me give you one example. During the Black Lives Matter movement in the US, Sodexo has been very active in promoting, of course, all the good things that our Black community is doing and the support that we do, and say, hey, this cannot happen again. But then 2 months down the road, there was this project in Georgia to restrict voting rights, as you probably heard. And at that time, we wrote a statement just saying, we believe in freedom of access to vote. We had immense negative reactions within the company and outside the company. And I got criticized, for having just stated that we believe that free access to voting rights is critical. So that's corporate activism. It's just the beginning of it. But companies will have to become political animals if they want to be up to the challenge. That will require courage and enter into fascinating unknown territories.